Dear God, we are gathered here to pray to you, inspired by the medicine wheel. Help us to find the balance between mind, intelligence, heart, and body, in order to live in harmony with all that surrounds us. We thank you for the gifts from all directions. We thank you for the gifts of vision, guidance, and leadership. Help us to be like the eagle that can soar high and see far, in order to monitor and protect the well-being of all living beings. Help us to see situations clearly and to reach out in order to be good leaders, listening and serving others. We thank you for the gifts of love, confidence, and self-discipline that allow us to love and treat others with love. Help us to listen with our eyes, ears, and hearts, to let what is negative pass and to thus remain positive. Help us to express ourselves, to communicate, and to do good around us in order to accomplish our mission and reach our goals with determination. We thank you for the gifts of reflection and perseverance. Help us to be like the turtle so that we can see inside and accept ourselves as we are. Like the bear, give us strength to reach the highest levels of ourselves. We thank you for wisdom and the gift of intelligence. May our strength resemble that of strong animals in order for us to learn to be good providers. Help us to think clearly in order to make good decisions. Help us to learn that everything has meaning and to learn life's lessons. Mother Earth, we thank you for the gift of life. We thank you for the food of each day, for the plants that nourish and heal us, for the trees that become our shelter, protection, and warmth. Help us to always respect nature, taking care of the environment and the people, and using only what we need. Father Sky, we thank you for the sun, light, energy, and warmth. We also thank you for the thirst to live in harmony with our environment, wind, rain, and snow. For all these gifts, we say, miigwech, miigwech, miigwech. Amen. I'd like to do a little bit of housekeeping before we continue. We would invite you to limit this discussion in the chat, and I appreciate you all sharing the lands on which you reside. We would ask you that throughout this webinar, if you do have any questions for any of the panelists, any of the people sharing today, we would ask you to type it in the question and answer box. And we will be having a question period at the end of our webinar. We had a few slides mixed up, so I'm going to go back. I'd like to give you a sense of where we're at in our year. And currently, we are completing the season of creation. The season of creation is a time to renew our relationship with our Creator and all creation through celebration, conversion, and commitment together. During the season of creation, we join our sisters and brothers in the ecumenical family in prayer and action for our common home. Ecumenical Patriarch Demetrios I proclaimed that September 1st was the day of prayer for creation for the Orthodox in 1989. In fact, the Orthodox Church year starts on that day with a commemoration of how God created the world. Pope Francis made the Roman Catholic Church's warm welcoming of the season official in 2015, the same year that he published Laudato Si. In recent years, Statements from religious leaders around the world have also encouraged the faithful to take time to care for creation during the month-long celebration. The season starts on September 1st, the day of prayer for creation, and ends on October 4th, the feast of St. Francis of Assisi, the patron saint of ecology, beloved by many Christian denominations. This year, 5 years after the publication of Laudato Si', Pope Francis will mark the end of the season of creation by signing his new encyclical, Fratelli Tutti. It was officially signed yesterday in Assisi and presented this morning in Rome. The encyclical is a continuation of his papacy. The reference once again to St. Francis of Assisi leads us to believe that the emphasis will be on the great dimensions of fraternity that marked the life of St. Francis, including his life with the poor. The encyclical focuses on human fraternity and social friendship. Pope Francis suggests ways in which we can build a more just, peaceful world, one in which we recognize each other as sisters and brothers of one human family. You can read it as of today on the Vatican website, and it's available in both English, French, and a few other languages. And I personally look forward to reading it. At Development and Peace, we would like to mark the end of the season of creation by giving you a very important update on For Our Common Home campaign. On that note, I would like to introduce Elana Wright, Campaign Officer, Mobilization and Advocacy. And Elana helps inform our campaigns. She represents Development and Peace on national and international civil society coalitions and lobbies everyone from prime ministers to premiers and MPs to ambassadors, CEOs, and unions on social, environmental, gender, and peace issues. Elana.
Thank you so much, Janelle. I'm thrilled to be with all of you here today. We just reached over 100 participants. So it's really exciting to be talking to you all who, so many of you were the leaders of this campaign for our common home, focused on Amazonian human rights defenders. And, you know, we've all been through so much globally this year with the pandemic. I thought it would be good to look back at, you know, those days before the pandemic began, when we began launching this campaign. And so, Luke, if we could go to the next slide, we'll look at the campaign year, 2019 to 2020. So just as Janelle was marking the end of the season of creation, we also marked it last year, and that's when we launched our campaign for our common home. And September was a big month, September 2019, when there was the UN Climate Action Summit in New York. Then there was the incredible global mobilization led by Greta Thunberg of the global climate strike in late September. And for some of us who are here in Montreal, we were so thrilled to host Greta here in Montreal. We had the largest march ever that Montreal had ever seen. It was an incredible show of support, and we had marches, as you all know, across the country, showing that Canadians really want to see action on climate change. That brought us into the Synod on the Amazon, which Pope Francis called in October at the Vatican. And so our attention was really focused on the Amazon through the month of October. We also were having our federal elections here in Canada, where the Liberal government was re-elected. Then following that, it was COP25 in Madrid, Spain. And we were campaigning all through this time. And then we led the Share Lent campaign, also on the same theme for our common home during Lent this year. And in May, we marked the 5th anniversary of Laudato Si', how the time has passed since Pope Francis shared with us his other encyclical. And I want to mention that due to the pandemic, we missed two incredible opportunities, which we hope to be able to hold in the future. And so one was a delegation of Mura and other Amazonian indigenous peoples in a delegation to the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Peoples. And there was going to be a Canadian tour, so we would have been able to, in person, hand over the letters to the Mura people at that time. But that event at the UN was canceled, and it has been just actually postponed. So hopefully it will be held in the fall of 2021 or in the spring of 2022. It's so unsure. Also, something that was unfortunately canceled was the Development and Peace Youth Delegation to Brazil, when they would have brought the letters to the communities. And so this is why we're having this virtual handover of the letters today. Next slide, Luke. I want to announce an incredible accomplishment of our movement. Can you click again, Luke? And keep clicking. We have some animation because we really want to celebrate. We had the goal of reaching 65,000 signatures by Canadians of our solidarity message to the Mura and the Serengeros. And just on Friday, we were able to achieve that. You know, we had already collected around 61,500 letters. We have those all in the Montreal office, all those signatures. And we did a last call out to animators and diocesan councils across Canada. And so we received some news that there was thousands more signatures coming in the mail. And so those will be received. And so we're thrilled to say that we've actually have reached our goal. And that number was decided last year, and it represents the incredible biodiversity of the Amazon forest, because we see that we know that there's over 65,000 species of trees and invertebrates. So it's an incredible achievement. And here is some examples of the creativity. So some letters that were signed in the traditional way, and other people wrote their own letters, and some children drew their own drawings. And it's an incredible thing to see. And we could go to the next slide, Luke. And here's an example of the piles of letters that we have in the Montreal office. And so it was quite something special to count all of those signatures and to see how many Canadians are concerned about the struggle of Amazonian communities and the courage that it takes for them to continue to defend their territory when there's so many threats to it. And another aspect of the campaign was that we asked people to sign a pledge. So over 1,000 people have signed the Intergenerational Pledge, and we want to invite you to go ahead and if you haven't signed that pledge, to go ahead and do it. Next slide, Luke. The pledge asked people to show that they're part of this movement of ecological conversion that Pope Francis has called us to, and to choose among these things, to eat more plant-based meals, to choose eco-friendly transportation, to buy less, to buy local, to buy organic, to buy fair trade, and really reduce your waste to zero if possible. Also, we asked you to reconnect with nature in order to appreciate nature, and of course to be creative. And so this is a very important movement of every generation, seniors, middle-aged people, youth, children, to all come together and make that change, and to challenge each other to make that change. Thanks so much, and I'll be back later with more details on what action we're going to take now that we have that incredible number of 65,000 signatures.
Thank you so much, Elana. And I think it's just amazing, even during this pandemic, that we were able to achieve our goal of 65,000 signatures and more, and those beautiful drawings and submissions from across the country. So I'd like to share, Luke, you can go to the next slide, please. I'd like to share a little bit of my personal experience. Before I became an animator, I was a youth rep from Winnipeg, representing Manitoba, and I was really blessed to be among 9 women that were chosen from across Canada to attend the Rio Plus 20 United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development. And so the first picture, you see our delegation. I don't know if some of you know Lydia Nakbil. And so we had the opportunity to meet her, one of our partners from the Philippines. And with our 2 youth programs officers at the time, Marie-Hélène Roy and Shelley, who's now Amiot, we were able to participate, among other things, in the People's Summit, which was the gathering of civil society, environmental, and social justice organizations, and where we had the opportunity to meet our partners. For me, this was such an important solidarity tour, and it really did change my life. As a Métis woman, I think it was so crucial for me and I had this wonderful opportunity to meet other Indigenous people from around the world, mostly from Latin America. So in the second photo, you see me with Erin and Melodie, 2 other women from this Canadian delegation that also identify as Indigenous. And, you know, when we had the opportunity to talk to people, I think there was just kind of this weirdly innate understanding amongst ourselves about this, you know, that we needed to affirm our identity, and we understood the kind of the struggles that our peoples suffer. We were able to walk along many organizations that were really fighting for, and are still fighting for, Indigenous people's rights. At the bottom of the slide, you have 3 pictures here. I was really, I had this wonderful opportunity to participate in the Indigenous Peoples International Conference on Sustainable Development and Self-Determination. And this really is where the concept of free, prior, and informed consent became much clearer for me, and a lot more meaningful and a lot more impactful. And we had the wonderful opportunity to meet chiefs, one from Canada, in fact. We met Bill Erasmus, who is a Dene chief from the Northwest Territories. So I always believed that it was important to learn directly from the people who are fighting for their rights, and hence, you know, the importance of solidarity tours. This year, I was invited to accompany the group that was going to deliver the solidarity letters to our partners and Indigenous communities in Brazil. So to speak to you more about this solidarity tour, I'd like to pass it to Selina Hunt. Selina is Development and Peace's Youth Programs Officer. In this role, she has been at the forefront of engaging young people on university campuses and parishes across Canada in our For Our Common Home campaign. So Selina.
Thank you, Janelle. Yeah, so I, as you may have heard, or as Elana just mentioned, we had planned this solidarity tour to Brazil for July 2020 with 12 young adults from 6 different provinces in Canada, a few of whom are on the call today. So the plan for this trip had been to travel first to Brasilia to engage in some advocacy work with the Simi at the Canadian Embassy there. And then we had planned to attend the Congress of the Pastoral Land Commission in Marabá, where we would have delivered the solidarity letters that many of you have signed, and met with different community members and organizations at that event. We also plan to travel to Manaus and then to go on to meet with the Mora people. Obviously, and unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we weren't able to undertake the trip, but as Elana announced, we were still able to meet this major goal of getting more than 65,000 signatures. And because we weren't able to deliver the solidarity letters in person, we are doing it virtually through this event. So thank you all for being part of this event today to bear witness to that. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Jason, and he is one of the young adults who is planning to join the Solidarity Tour to Brazil. So he'll just take a few moments to talk about why he wanted to join the Solidarity Tour to the Amazon and what his message of solidarity is to the Serengeros and the Mora people. So over to you, Jason.
Thank you, Selina. First of all, I would just like to say a huge good afternoon or good morning, depending where you are, to everyone for joining us for this very beautiful event. First of all, I would just like to take the moment to introduce myself. So my name is Jason Segali. I am the youth rep for Development and Peace for Manitoba for the Anglophone side. I'm also part of Development and Peace for the University of St. Boniface on our campus in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and I'm also a youth and young adult ministry leader at Mary Mother of the Church Parish in the Archdiocese of St. Boniface in Winnipeg. First of all, I would just like to share just a couple of reasons why I decided to be part of this very important and essential event of meeting the Mura and the Serengeros people in Latin America, specifically in Brazil. One of the first reasons why I decided to participate was the important message of encounter. Pope Francis and his encyclical Laudato Si, and as well in his new encyclical, which was just released today, Fratelli Tutti, which I'm very excited to read as well. Pope Francis really encourages this message of encounter. For somebody who lives in the Northern Hemisphere in Western society, for me, would be very interesting and very beautiful to learn about the realities that our brothers and sisters in the Global South are experiencing. Furthermore, I decided to join the Youth Solidarity Trip in order to understand a little bit deeper the economic, ecclesiastic situation that is going on, and how can we as individuals and as young people be able to witness the incredible work that the Muras and the Serengeros people are doing in partnership with several organizations such as RIPAM, for example, and how can we, coming back to our home country here in Canada, how can we be that voice for these people on the other side of the world? So overall, for me, it would have been a very beautiful opportunity to bear witness, and as well as to encounter a reality other than mine that I currently live right now. Lastly, we'd just like to share a message of solidarity to our brothers and sisters in Brazil, the Muras and the Serengeros. On behalf of the Youth Solidarity team that was to visit in Brazil, I would like to just wish each and every single person all our deepest thoughts and our deepest prayers for all of you right now, not only in combating the COVID situation, but as well as continuing on with the incredible work that you are all doing. Please know that we are here with you in solidarity, especially here in Canada as well. And we're definitely keeping all of you in our thoughts, in our prayers throughout these letters, and as well in our own ways through educating people in our community. Thank you so much, everyone. Back to you, Selina.
Thank you so much, Jason. That was a beautiful message. And yes, it would have been wonderful to travel with you and the rest of the youth delegation, maybe someday. So now, Luke, you can go ahead and press play. So this is just a little video we've put together that we'd like to share with just some photos of how young adults from across Canada have engaged in the For Our Common Home campaign. So there are lots of different activities of solidarity, of education, and of mobilization throughout this campaign. So you'll see some lovely photos that students and children and young adults have done to express their ideas of the Amazon and of their messages of solidarity. There's also different photos of our youth representatives who participated in the youth assembly last autumn, where they learned how to animate the campaign in their particular contexts in universities and in parishes across Canada. So this youth assembly includes young adults, Anglophone and Francophone, from across Canada. And personally for me, it's always a huge pleasure to work with young adults and be inspired by their creativity and their energy for the mission of development and peace, and for whatever campaign we are currently undertaking. So I hope you enjoy these few images. It's just a couple minutes long. So. And then I'll give it back to you, Janelle, to carry on.
Great. Thank you so much, Selina and Jason. I wish I could say when, and I wish I had a crystal ball and, you know, we could figure out when we're going to actually make our way to Brazil. But I know that in the meantime, your messages of solidarity, you know, we continue to meet as a group. You know, we met during this time of pandemic, and I hope that we can continue to meet with the young adults as we prepare, if ever we do have the opportunity. I really do hope that the young adults that were selected eventually do go, because like I said, for me, I think this the solidarity tour that I had the opportunity to be on really changed my life, solidified why it's so important for us to support our partners, why it's so important for us to come back to Canada and spread that message, because many of those voices aren't necessarily heard in mainstream media. And so we need to keep amplifying those voices. And like Jason, you were saying, they do such amazing work. And I think we, as members and as Development and Peace, should be so proud of the work that we do. And one of the people that helps us immensely in creating those partnerships with our partners in Brazil and in Colombia is Anne-Catherine Kennedy, who's a programs officer for Colombia and Brazil. She's an amazing woman. She could talk your ear off. I could literally stay all day and listen to Anne-Catherine. She, you know, for I don't know how many years now, has been creating and sustaining strong partnerships with church-led and grassroots organizations in the Amazonian region. Advocating for Indigenous and traditional communities is an important role, part of her role. And Catherine will be presenting a little bit more about the current Brazilian situation, as well as sharing messages of solidarity from our partners in Brazil. And Catherine.
All right, thank you, Janelle. So when I first started preparing for today's webinar, I was trying to explain why we didn't have the materials that we wanted to have from the Seringueiros and from the Mura and from the CIMI and the CPT, because we had, I had contacted them and shared the good news about us having reached and surpassed our goal of signatures and giving them updates on the campaign. And we wanted to have sort of responses from them, impressions, what did they think, and did they have any message to give back to us during the webinar. And it took a while to get feedback, and I was getting nervous that I wasn't going to get any and that I would have to sort of speak in their name or find other ways to communicate to you some news from them. And but luckily we got a lot of information that I'm going to share with you a few minutes after I finish speaking. But some of the reasons why it took them a while to answer, though, is because of the general problems that they are facing in Brazil and because of the pandemic. The pandemic making their situations just wildly more complicated. The Seringueiros, not of Machadinho do Oeste, but others, all with the help of the CPT, managed to expulse invaders from an extractivist reserve. So that's like a really good news. It kept people really busy and it made it hard for them to get back to me in time. Not to mention the internet is really terrible in this region. the Muda have been really busy trying to keep away from the cities and try and keep away from COVID. And they've been also enacting barriers to keep invaders out. So again, they're having a hard time just sort of getting WhatsApp because they don't have a lot of good internet access. And basically, things are hard for our partners. And I want to tell you just sort of briefly what's going on in Brazil and what is happening with our partners. We would have had in Brazil, I think, a really difficult situation because of the government we have in place at the moment. The federal government of Brazil is a government that firmly believes in the neo-extractivist predatory model, like at its purest and in its hardest, roughest forms. It believes that resources are commodities that need to be taken out of the earth, extracted and sold and exported at any cost. People in the environment have no rights and have no say and have no importance. The government denies the rights, and the government also denies science and promotes fake and false news and disinformation, which makes it very difficult for people to know what is right and what is wrong, especially in the context of a pandemic. Imagine not knowing what is really real. Do certain medicines work? Don't they? Can you catch it one way? Can you not? If we're having a hard time figuring it out here in Canada, imagine how difficult it is in a country where fake news is really rampant and the government is encouraging it. The government also has a discourse that we've been getting familiar with over the past while of hatred, of violence, of intolerance, of emboldening people that have aggressive and violent tendencies and that want their rights above anyone else's rights. And these rights are economic rights. And so the rights to invade territories, to take resources, and to make money at all costs, and to commodify nature. So this is all made worse in the context of a pandemic. It's also made much worse in the context of certain sectors of the economy that have a lot of influence and a lot of clout and a lot of power. And here I'm speaking specifically about the mining industry in Brazil. It's fascinating to see how the mining industry in Brazil, and it's not the only industry that's making things worse, but it's a principal industry that is driving the rate of infection across Brazil and probably in other countries as well. I haven't seen statistics, but I would not be surprised. So I've broken down into 4 different ways that the mining industry is negatively impacting and worsening the situation of the COVID-19 pandemic. In one way, the mining companies they are ignoring the real threats posed by this pandemic, and they're continuing to operate as though everything were normal. And they, along with different governments, exerted lots of pressure in order to be declared essential services. In Brazil, even the National Conference of Brazilian Bishops didn't agree with this and thought that it was rather dangerous given all the precariousness and very close-quartered working conditions and how these workers and laborers move, and they're in different communities and different towns, and they're going to become mega vectors of transmission and infection, and how they're also going in and out of indigenous communities and traditional communities and communities where people have very frail sometimes health due to perhaps mining contamination or other issues, but also because they don't have really an existing healthcare system to begin with. So if they get sick, they're going to get very sick and they're going to die. The mining industry in Brazil has become the principal vector really of transmission. And it's infected workers, it's infected communities, it's infecting indigenous communities and traditional communities. We're talking about over 145,000 deaths in Brazil. Something like 4.8, if I remember, million cases. And this is a country that is not at all interested in recording the number of deaths or the number of cases. So you've got to imagine that the numbers are much, much higher. Out of these 145,000 deaths, I've seen, and maybe Padre Dario can correct me if this is wrong, but 3/4 are found in the Amazonian region. That's like phenomenal. And the worst affected state apparently is the state of Amazonas, where we have the Muda. The second way that the mining industry is really negatively affecting the situation is that they are making use of the pandemic to sort of silence and complicate opposition and protesting. And they're doing this in cahoots with different governments. So we've got mining companies that are essential services and they're allowed to go about and do their business the way they want. But protesters and demonstrators are not allowed. But we don't have in Brazil regular freedom of association and regular freedom of movement under the guise of, well, we need to protect public health, so we can't have people getting together together, and they shouldn't be having meetings even, and shouldn't be preparing their lobbying. You know, none of that should be happening, but yet the industry should be allowed to continue to operate and contaminate and extract and hurt communities and the environment. And so a third way, and also in addition to this, is not only are the communities themselves not really allowed to mobilize and legitimately protest and demonstrate and talk about their grievances, but those that want them harmed, those that want to threaten them, those that seek to expulse them or even kill them. Brazil's a country with a lot of human rights and environmental defenders killings. These people are running around armed as though nothing were going on, and there's no one stopping them, and there's no one protecting the human right and environmental defenders. So you have a case where people's lives are really being put at risk. The third way that the mining industry is making the pandemic worse is a player in the pandemic, is that they're making use of the pandemic to mask and sort of downplay the negative impacts of their work and make themselves look like they're interested in communities and public health. So they are doing things like donating millions of testing kits instead of, say, reducing their pollution and not making people as sick, instead of paying their taxes, instead of not contaminating the water, instead of not exploiting their laborers and having them outsourced and paid so poorly. They're like making donations, including direct donations of food in some cases, which really sort of weakens and divides community resistance. But also when you have direct donation of money to different government ministries and to these tests, these testing kits that are given to the federal government, the response in return is that the governments are not really that keen in enforcing regulations for the mining industry, and so they're kind of turning a blind eye, and you've got favoritism and you've got a certain form of corruption that's taking place. And a fourth way that the mining industry is a player in this pandemic, in making it worse, is that they're making use of the pandemic to try and modify existing laws that regulate the mining industry or that protect the environment. They're trying to modify laws and have them be made permanent modifications. They're also taking advantage of reductions in fiscalizing and monitoring and fining, and they are sharing much less information with the affected communities that are requesting information about the water they use, about where they're planning to extend their operations, under the guise of, well, it's a pandemic and we're not sure and we're not supposed to really talk, and, you know, just taking advantage of the fact that things are more difficult so that communities have less access to information. And the Minister of the Environment in Brazil was recorded, and the audio recording leaked. And he's recorded as saying that they need to take advantage of this wonderful opportunity that the pandemic has given them, which is that the media and government and all public institutions' attention is on the pandemic, and now is the best time to completely deregulate the mining industry and to take apart all environmental regulations to the best of their abilities. So the mining industry was already a bad player. It was already causing a lot of havoc in the communities that we work with. And it's proving itself to be an even worse corporate player in the context of the pandemic. And the pandemic is getting into the communities in a large part through mining industry operations and activities. So the coordination of indigenous organizations of the Brazilian Amazon, for instance, is demanding that there be a complete paralyzation of economic activities, mining, amongst others, in their territories, but that isn't happening. So 145,000 plus deaths, a large number of them in the Amazon. Brazil really needed our support and our solidarity before this pandemic, and it needs it even more. And I would like to now share some messages from the seringueiros from the Mura, from the CPT and the CIMI.
Olá, sou Jeremias, liderança do povo Mura aqui do Brasil. Nosso povo vem sofrendo várias ameaças, como a mineração ilegal em nossas terras, sem o nosso consentimento, a falta de demarcação de um território contínuo também é um grande problema para o nosso povo. Nosso povo vive cercado por fazendeiros e agora é mais a questão mineração. E isso é ruim, isso é difícil, isso nos mata culturalmente, nos mata espiritualmente. Então, eu queria pedir apoio de vocês, né, ao povo canadense, que nos ajude, ajude o nosso povo a lutar. Nós precisamos do apoio de vocês para que a gente possa vencer aquilo que a gente vem enfrentando em nosso território. Tá? Quero agradecer muito pelas assinaturas e dizer que o povo Mura é um povo resistente e que vê o bem de todo o povo, que vê quer ver o bem do planeta Terra. E a Amazônia, como vocês devem ter acompanhado, está queimando, está sofrendo e a gente precisa proteger. Tá? A gente precisa proteger ela, porque nós moramos nelas e vocês também dependem dela. Tá? Meu muito obrigado, um forte abraço a todos. Olá.
E oramos a Pai Tupã e nossos ancestrais que possam conceder saúde e muito amor para que vocês continuem trabalhando, apoiando as causas indígenas, a outros povos, né? Que Pai Tupã possa estar continuando vocês nessa caminhada. Eu me chamo Milena Correia Mura, sou da etnia Mura, sou da aldeia Moiraí, sou coordenadora da organização indígena Mulheres Muras de Altase, com a sigla OIMA, e eu de todo o meu coração estou agradecida a todo o amor e a humildade da parte de vocês. Fiquem com o Pai Tupã.
Eu sou Edna, sou missionária do CIMI há 20 anos. Sinto-me muito grata, muito agradecida a cada uma das pessoas que somaram nessa luta dos Muras. Isso nos fortalece enquanto missionários, enquanto agentes de pastoral na luta por esses povos, e também empodera os povos indígenas, sobretudo nesse momento os Muras, com as suas lutas, a luta pela garantia de seus direitos. As principais demandas que poderiam ser apoiadas seria a demarcação da terra, porque sem a terra o povo perde a identidade, perde sua cultura. Eu sou
Aqui que fala é o cacique Fábio Tato, da aldeia São Félix, município de Altazes, Amazonas, da etnia Mura. Eu venho através desse áudio agradecer a Caritas do Canadá pelo apoio e parceria dada ao nosso povo nessa pandemia, né, e na questão mineração, questão invasão de búfalo. Agradecer mesmo, muito obrigado mesmo pelo esse apoio e essa parceria ao nosso povo. Estamos toda a aldeia agradecido por essa força e essa parceria. Muito obrigado mesmo.
This is a message from Luis Ventura, the regional coordinator of the CIMI for the region North 1. First, I am deeply grateful for the work of development and peace and defense of the rights of the Muda people and in the advocacy and awareness of Canadian society and those responsible for companies linked to the mining sector. The results of the campaign are very important. The number of signatures is very relevant and the work done with young people is very promising. Indeed, such campaigns are essential for guaranteeing the rights of Indigenous peoples in the Amazon and for us to build a model of respectful coexistence with the land, with peoples, and with generations to come. We want to recognize all this work and commitment and thank you once again for your strength and solidarity. Here we are living a particularly tense time since July, especially in the region of the Pineapple River, where the CIMI North 1 of Borba and Altazes team is also working to defend the territorial rights of the Maragua people, whose lands are also not recognized. In these months, a spate of violent actions involving the military police and the state of Amazonas took the lives of indigenous and riverine people. It spread fear and indignation among the communities and was characteristic of the largest situation of vulnerability of human rights in recent times. A missionary from the CIMI team went to the region and stayed for several weeks, taking statements and following the tensest moments of the conflict. Currently, 2 missionaries of the team are in the area offering psychological support and strengthening the communities while we wait for investigations to progress and the crimes to be ascertained. Once again, our gratitude, a big hug to the whole family of development and peace. Sister Jean Bellini of the Comissão Pastoral da Terra, the Pastoral Land Commission. On behalf of the rubber taper communities in the region of Machadinho do Oeste and the CPT that accompanies them, I come to thank the people, parishes, and dioceses that have contributed to the Lenten campaign. Their contributions have made it possible to sustain the development and peace-supported projects of the CPT, CIMI, and other entities in Brazil that work with indigenous and traditional peoples and communities. The Mura people, whose communities have been overwhelmed by the urban expansion of the city of Manaus, whom we met through the campaign, continue to face invasions of their territory. The traditional rubber tapper communities in the region of Machadinho do Oeste, in Rondônia, Acre, and the south of Amazonas have faced many difficulties. In addition to conflicts over land with the spread of the pandemic, they have been unable to sell the product of their work, latex. They do not go to the cities to avoid the contagion, and buyers do not come to them to buy latex. As a result, many families were even short of food. Without selling their products, they could not buy food. Once again, we thank you for your contributions because in addition to concrete help, which makes a difference, the solidarity of the Canadian people with the people of the countryside in Brazil encourages us to continue to overcome the challenges. Now I would like to give the mic over to Padre Dario. Father Dario Bossi is the Superior General of the Combonian missionaries and a coordinator of Iglesias y Minería, an ecumenical group that focuses on the adverse impacts of the mining industry. He spent the past 15 years in Brazil, and his region is located at the heart of the Amazon, including the area with the largest open pit iron mine and a territory, ginormous territory affected by this mining project, spanning over 900 kilometers of rail line that connects the mine to the port of São Luís do Maranhão, affecting around 100 different small communities that can be found between the mine and the port. Affected by the train, its noise, its pollution, accidents. Padre Dario testified at the Vatican, the Vatican's landmark Pan-Amazonian Synod in October of 2019. And Padre Dario is a strong ally of communities affected by mining, a strong ally of the community of Piquete Baixo in Maranhão, and is well known in the world of those who advocate for the rights of communities affected by mining. A good friend, and please have a listen and welcome Padre Dario.
Thank you so much, Anne-Catherine. Very great presentation. Too big for me. And you exaggerate because I'm not the general superior of the Combonian mission. It's just the coordinator in Brazil, but it's good. It's enough for me. Sorry for my English. I would try to talk with all of you. I am very, very grateful for all this work of campaign you have been working at, and this collecting of signatures. It's very, very important for us who are working in Amazon region. So many, many thanks to all of you. I would like to present you a slide show about the situation, the actual situation of Amazon region with the help of Luke. Please, you can pass. I would try to talk to you about extractivism in Amazon region with the metaphor of and the memory, the very important memory of George Floyd and his sentence, "I can't breathe." well, at the same time as the Negro people in very many parts of the world can't breathe against violence they are suffering, the same sentence could be used, could be a cry and the shutting of the Amazon forest. You can pass. The next, the important thing to understand is that we have to face at least two very different conceptions, two very different visions about Amazon region. For many centuries, we had one, and still we have one very dangerous vision. Please click to read it. There are very many people who think at the Amazon region as a large empty space to be occupied, a raw resource that needs to be transformed, and a savage vastness that needs to be domesticated. This is the colonialistic vision that still is the basis of the extractivism model. But at the same time, we have another conception, another vision of the situation. Please click. There are many people thinking at the Amazon region as a living subject, a being or various beings to enter into relationship with. And this is not my quotation. This is a sentence that we took from the very beginning of the preparation of the synod, of the Amazon Synod. We have been listening to something like 80,000 people living in different parts of the Amazon region. And some of them were stating this, that the Amazon region is a living subject. We have to find ways of interrelation with it. Okay, let's pass. The next. The vision about extractivism could be understandable through a good definition that the bishops of the Latin American Council, CELAM, gave to it. It is an unstoppable tendency to transform the goods of nature into capital. In Querida Amazonia, the exhortation after the synod, there is a quotation from a poetry that says that the indigenous people feel themselves living in a region of robbed territories. And Pope Francis makes a very strong statement saying that economic operations that damage the Amazon and do not respect the rights of its people can be called just with two words: injustice and crime. Next. Just to make the connection between George Floyd and the Negroes' protests and struggles and the Amazon forest cry, we could use the image of the environmental racism. What is it? It's a way of producing exclusion and generating damage against environmental damages against the most isolated people, the weakest levels of the society. For example, in the northern part of Brazil, we have the weakest region for what concerns, for example, health security. In Amazon region, we have just 10% of the medium and high complexity care hospitals. And at the same time, we have peoples with the weaker immunity. When we lose an indigenous leader, indigenous community leader, which we call cacique, or a sacred leader, a religious leader, which we call pajé, we say that it's something like burning our libraries, because they collect all the ancestral knowledge and all the informations and connections of the community. So they are very, very important persons that we are losing one by one, and which are the most tragic victims of COVID-19 in this moment. But we can understand environmental racism also with this example. of the consequences on the, and different consequences on the ethnic groups. For example, let's make an example. If we would have in the same hospital just white people hospitalized, from 100 persons white hospitalized for COVID-19, the death rate would be 28%. But if this group would be of black people, the death rate would be 36% in Brazil. And if they were indigenous, we will have 48% of people died. That's a good image to understand that the ethnic prejudice structured a weakness and an isolation of these little groups. They are saying that the lack of solidarity, the lack of care and prevention for COVID against these people is deliberate. And they used to say that it's the most evident expression of a genocide which is happening in Brazil, with the aim of weakening the resistance of the local people in the territories that are being aimed by the extractivist projects. Thank you. Next. To understand what's happening in Brazil, and that Anne-Catherine already explained very well, we can follow this cycle. What could happen just before the pandemic or in the post-pandemic world in Brazil? We suppose that the alternatives to plunder in Brazil would be probably more and more plunder, because our country would have to compete with very stronger economies. And in order to compete, they would have to flexibilize their political laws, their environmental and human rights laws. And this will permit the expansion of extractivism projects, especially in the frontiers of the not exploited regions. In order to enter and to overcome these frontiers more and more, the government and also these economical projects would need to militarize more and more the territories. And it's what's already happening because the government is sending the army and very many soldiers in the Amazon region and in the frontiers with the other countries, with the excuse of protecting the people from COVID and the forests from the fires, but it's very probable that there is a connection with this cycle and this importance of taking control of the territories. We understand so that every kind of resistance by the local peoples and local communities to defend their territories would more and more grow, as Luis Ventura explained to you in his message, and generate more and more threats. That's why in our country, please next click, we are saying, we are building, no, the previous, we are building a campaign called A Vida por Fio, which means life hanging on a thread, which is a self-protection campaign for threatened leaders and communities. It's a campaign which started from the Synod, from the Amazon Synod, as a commitment that we understood to be very, very urgent because of this growing of violence. Please, next. I'm still finishing. Pope Francis says that later will be too late. From the beginning, he tried and he wrote his encyclical Laudato Si just in order to influence the COP21 conference. We can say, click, that the consequences of the Laudato Si in 2015 are several. For example, we had the Catholic movement for climate against climate change, but also another click. As a consequence, as a direct follow-up of the Laudato Si, we had the founding of REPAN, the Pan-Amazonic Church Network. I belong to it, and we were working very much in it before, through, and after the Synod. And the Synod, the Amazon Synod, another click, is a very proper son of the Laudato Si. Pope Francis says that the Synod is the first son of Laudato Si. And as a consequence of the Synod, we have more and more actions. For example, and we have another click here, the campaign Amazonicity, which is an initiative from RIPAM in order to sensitize especially foreign peoples and countries, as the Canadian ones, who are already very solidary with us, in order to struggle for the defense of the nature and the human rights in Amazon region. But we have also other initiatives. For example, another click, the World Assembly for Amazon, which started in July as a platform gathering very many association organizations and local and peoples and international activists in order to defend the Amazon. And it's already continuing with very many initiatives. You can find it in the websites. And the third initiative is the campaign of divestment, which is a very proper campaign of our network, Church and Mining. We can explain it in the last slide. Please, next slide, which is the last one. I would like to just to tell you some of the actions we are taking, also in connection with the international groups and with the support in some cases also of the development and peace. For example, we are making very much lobbying against laws that threatens peoples and territories. One of the most dangerous is the law to permit mining industries and enterprises inside indigenous lands. It's very dangerous because it would add something that, like 20% of invasions of the territories of Amazon region. Another very important campaign from APIB, which is the National Association of Indigenous People in Brazil, is called Defund Bolsonaro. And they use the slogan, or the Amazon or Bolsonaro. There is a very evident alternative between them. Another initiative, as I said, is the divestment campaign from mining, which is directed especially to religious institutes and dioceses and ecumenical groups in order for them to investigate about on their investments and their fundings, because in very many cases the church fundings are supporting damaging initiatives from the mining industries. Another initiative is about new models of consumption. And we are working at this slogan, take the Amazon off your plate. We will work at it on the 26th and on the 16th of October, which is the Food National Day. And we will try to reflect with the Brazilian people, but the world people, about the importance of avoiding all the products that come from Amazon devastation. And to conclude, it's very important, as Jeremias Moura was saying, to work at the demarcation of the indigenous territories and the territories of the traditional communities in order to foster and to flourish their life plans and their local self-determination. Without it, we would not be able to defend and to imagine a new way of living together with Amazon, which is our partner, our living being in interrelationship with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Padre Dario. We are thrilled that you were able to join us today and not only provide insight into what's happening right now for Indigenous people in the Amazon, but also, in terms of the pandemic, but also showing us the interconnectedness between the anti-racism movements happening in the US and in Canada also. And Indigenous people even this week are mobilizing, and many people have joined them in solidarity to fight racism and genocide and associated practices, including extractivism. And that list of actions is so inspiring. And here in Canada, we can also do many things to take action. And so I'm really happy to be able to tell you how as development and peace members, we'll be able to continue to take action in solidarity with the Amazon. Next slide, Luke. So, we've said it many times already today, but 65,000 signatures from Canadians represents a lot of concerned citizens. And so what we will do now is publicize the fact that Canadians care about what is happening for in the Amazon and for the people, the human rights defenders who are protecting their land and their water from extractive projects, from the pandemic, from so many threats, from industrial agriculture, from buffalo, from cattle, from corporations who are threatening their livelihood, taking their territory. Next slide, Luke. So what we do now is we'll write, Development and Peace will write a letter on behalf of the 65,000 people who have signed that solidarity letter to the Brazilian and Canadian governments. So we will send letters to the Prime Minister, to the Minister of International Trade here in Canada. We'll also send letters to the Canadian Embassy in Brazil. Canada has created something called the Voices at Risk Guidelines to protect human rights defenders. And so the Canadian Embassy in Brazil has an obligation to accompany and ensure the safety of human rights defenders in Brazil. And so we will notify them of the situation of both the Sarangueiros and the Mura, and we will ask them what steps they will take to respect their own Voices at Risk guidelines to make sure that these human rights defenders are protected. We'll also write to the Canadian Embassy the Brazilian Embassy in Ottawa, and let them know that this is an issue for Canadians, what's happening in Brazil, what President Bolsonaro is doing, and that we are very concerned, and we'll ask how they can respond to our letter. We also will be able to write a letter directly to the Canadian mining company, which is called Brazil Potash. It's based in Toronto, and its major investor is Forbes and Manhattan, which is also a Canadian investment firm. And so we will write a letter to them and ask them for a response. We are very committed to publicizing these letters widely, and so when we send them, we'll also put them on the website and notify the media that we've sent them. And we really hope to be able to attract quite a bit of attention to the issues in the Amazon. And we're also going to highlight how the pandemic has affected the communities and made the communities even more vulnerable to of course, the virus and to just threats to their lives and livelihoods. So I want to assure you that we will do everything we can to show to the media, to show to the Canadian government, and show to the Brazilian government and to this Canadian mining company that Canadians are concerned. And there's other advocacy that we continue to do, including fighting against the current, well, this free trade agreement, which is currently in negotiation between Canada and Brazil. And we just find it incredible that Canada would be willing to negotiate with the Bolsonaro government on free trade, as if we can feel confident that Brazil would be ensuring the respect of their citizens, that they would respect the human rights of their citizens. I mean, Canada cannot negotiate a free trade in a free trade agreement in an ethical way with a country that is, just decimating the rights of their citizens, and especially the most vulnerable citizens, including the Indigenous peoples. And so I think I'll close there, but of course we will have a question period. I want to mention that that Padre Dario can stay with us until 4:30. So if you have questions specifically for Padre Dario, it would be best for you to ask them right away before he'll have to leave. I'll hand it over back to Janelle.
Thank you so much, Elana, and thank you, Padre Dario. I see questions coming in, and I'll just wrap up before we get to our Q&A. So before we get to our Q&A, I'd like to quickly reintroduce, many of you were at our launch, our Recovering Together campaign. Now, I know last year we absolutely promised you that we were going to have a 2-year campaign on For Our Common Home. This is a lesson for us to never make a promise. But still, and I say that jokingly because we are, of course, still integrating many elements of For Our Common Home into the Recovering Together campaign. Of course, in March, we were unable to even be in parishes to have our Share Lent collection. We had to, within 2 weeks, create an entire virtual campaign. Many of you were involved in doing that and getting the word out in your communities and your parishes, so thank you for that. Over the summer, it was decided that we really needed to kind of change gears because of COVID-19, and it seems like it will remain with us for quite some time. But the fact that COVID-19 has deeply impacted the most vulnerable, as Padre Dario is also mentioned in his presentation. And so the Recovering Together campaign is different elements. It's not our typical fall action campaign. Yes, there will be, we are encouraged to sign a petition. Elana could write it in the chat because we are actually part of, as we're continuing, this campaign and launching into this new campaign, Recovering Together, we joined in a ecumenical initiative, an ecumenical coalition called For the Love of Creation. And so this petition will be closing, it will be presented in the House of Commons, but it will be closing on October 6th. And therefore, we do encourage you to sign it. And it's closely tied to our Recovering Together campaign because it asks for a just recovery. What do we want our world to look like after this pandemic? I don't think that we want to go back to what things were. Can we imagine a better future and a more just world for everyone? Of course, in our Recovering Together in the fall, we do encourage you to participate in your local regional workshops. Many of them will be tailored specifically to your diocese, given that we have encouraged dioceses to also make up the collection that we weren't able to do for Share Lent 2020. And so a big thank you to the dioceses that have already done their makeup collection. And this is also considered a special collection, given that members we're asking Development and Peace to have a special collection for our partners who are really changing their programs to be able to respond to the pandemic. And so part of this campaign is also highlighting the amazing work of our partners around the world that are changing what they are doing currently to be able to respond to the pandemic, to be able to support the most vulnerable communities. And so we encourage you to participate in it fully. If you missed the launch that was held a few weeks ago, we recorded the launch, and so it's available on our YouTube page. The English version, and Catherine, it was just such a beautiful opportunity to learn more about how COVID-19 was affecting our partners in Brazil. So I encourage you to go watch the launch. So I think that kind of sums up our recovering together. I know for many of us, it's very different. We're going virtual for most of this campaign, if not the entirety of this campaign. And so we will do our best to keep you mobilized, keep you motivated, so then we can all recover together as one human family. So let's move on to the question and answer period, because I see so many great questions here. I'd like to first, ask, I think there's a message to Padre Dario. I know, Elana, you might have answered this. But Elena Boyko is saying, thank you so much, Padre Dario. Your presentation is most informative and inspiring. Will there be English documents to support the Take the Amazon Off Your Plate campaign, and where can we access them? So maybe Elana, I think you have some elements, but Padre Dario, if you wish, you can add a little bit more information about what this campaign will entail.
Janelle, just to say that there's many questions about mining in Brazil, and so I want to refer people to Mining Watch, which is an incredible organization based here in Canada, which is monitoring mining around the world. And on their website, they have profiled many Canadian mining companies that have activities in Brazil, and whose activities are being pushed through by the Bolsonaro government, because he is so pro-mining, and it really is threatening so many human rights defenders, so many Indigenous peoples who are living on their territories, and they have no more protections from their own government. So it's a real problem, and there's huge gold mines. There's the huge potassium mine project that Brazil Potash, the Canadian company, is advancing. There are other Canadian companies, and so I really encourage you to check out miningwatch.ca and follow their work, because they really are exposing the threats to the land and to the water in Brazil and across the Amazon, and actually across the world.
Yeah.
Thank you, Elana. And Padre, yes, go ahead.
Now, just to add that in this sense, we also are supporting your initiative, which is very, very important, of struggling for a very proper mission of the ombudsperson against mining industries, Canadian mining industries abroad. And we worked a lot with Development and Peace about it. And but answering to your question about the campaign, Take the Amazon Off Your Plate, I don't know if there is an English version. We will be working at it in the next weeks, and it would be very, very interesting if someone from Canada could be a helper and trying to think an international version of it. So I'm available to make this connection with you. Thank you.
And it is true that here in Canada, we are importing Brazilian beef, which is a real problem in Brazil, the industrial raising of cattle. And so when you are buying beef, if you are buying beef, just ensure the origin of it and ensure that you're not supporting this industry in Brazil.
Thank you, Elana. Padre, I have a question from Joe Gunn. Have the Brazilian bishops or religious congregations spoken out in criticism of free trade negotiations with Canada? If so, could DNP communicate those concerns to the Canadian bishops with a request for public solidarity from them?
A very good idea and suggestion. Actually, the Brazilian bishops are very active in defense of Amazon region. They recently in May wrote a letter which has been translated in 5 languages, also one an indigenous language, and spread all around the world. Talking about the biggest problems that the forest is and its peoples are living, and the lack of responsibility of the institutions. Actually, as World Assembly for Amazon region, we are working more properly about the EU and the Mercosur trade agreement, which is as dangerous as the Canadian one. But it's a good suggestion to trying to make also this connection and trying to help our bishops to have an international, a big international role. I think that this kind of alliances between bishop conferences are every day more and more urgent, because I confess that inside our country we are not able to solve our problems. We need very much the help and the pressure of the public opinion and the international incidents. So it's a very good suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Padre. Another question for you from Rudy Stocking. How much are those in Brazil, like yourself, able to mobilize to resist this extractivism? Are there many other people or organizations in Brazil doing this with you? Essentially, how strong is the resistance in Brazil itself to extractivism?
Thank you. Well, I'm just a missionary and also I'm a stranger, even if I'm Brazilian and now. But I think that the strongest and very important resistance is coming from the local communities. And it is very interesting to see how much, as much the violence is being increasing, at the same level is increasing the resistance, the creativity and the strength of and the initiative of these people, especially the indigenous peoples, because they are the most threatened ones. They are organizing themselves. For example, about COVID, the APIB, the Brazilian Association of Indigenous People, organized a very strong initiative in order to face COVID emergency. And they are making the same thing against extractive industries and for example, against this threatening of the mining laws in indigenous lands. So I think that our biggest hope comes from the initiative of the small communities when they are in conditions of articulating or networking by themselves and connecting at a higher level with associations and organizations like you, Development Peace, and like you, supporters from Canada. So this kind of alliance from the national level up to the international vigilance and lobbying and advocacy work are very, very important. But the resistance is local and with their protagonism.
Thank you, Padre. I think it, it really demonstrates the importance of local resistance, that it's really the people that are suffering that are really truly the advocates. And of course, we have partners that are supporting them. And here I have actually a comment, but I think we can turn it into a question that I'd like to address to Elana. Keith Gauntlet says that it's important to note that the activities of Canadian mining companies overseas, both in Brazil and elsewhere, is such that our campaign of pressuring the Canadian government to implement a meaningful ombudsperson process continues to be important. Elana, would you like to address kind of where we are at in terms of the ombudsperson? We mentioned it briefly, and how we're going to continue pushing the federal government to have an ombudsperson that can actually act.
Thank you so much, Janelle, because I know that so many of us are concerned about this whole ombudsperson fiasco. I mean, we mobilized for over a decade. We criticized the former CSR counselor, the corporate social responsibility counselor, because she didn't have enough power. She was simply a mediator. And 10 years later, actually more than 10 years later, here we are again with an ombudsperson who is essentially a CSR counselor, really just an advisor, and with no more power than the previous one. And so I don't know how you all feel, but I feel that we've been swindled. Basically, the government has tricked us into believing that this ombudsperson can do something. And as Padre Dario said, we have been working with our partners in the Global South to ensure that they continue to keep pressure on the Canadian government, and we hear their stories and we continue to share those with the government and say, this current ombudsperson as it is not going to be effective, and actually they can do more harm than good by wasting our time, by wasting communities' time in making a complaint, and while nothing concrete can come out of it. So we're continuing to push for the ombudsperson, for a powerful ombudsperson, an independent ombudsperson, separate from the Canadian government and separate from the Canadian Ministry of International Trade, who's not influenced by mining companies. And I really am thrilled right now to announce that actually we'll have a wonderful virtual rally. It's coming up in October, and it's organized in collaboration with all of the members of the CNCA. And it will be an opportunity for us to basically submit the petition that so many of you have signed. The virtual rally is called Rights for People, Rules for Business, a virtual rally for real corporate accountability of Canadian companies abroad. And we'll have some MPs on there as well. And it's easy to get distracted by the urgency, of course, of the current pandemic, but we can't abandon these other mechanisms for human rights, including the ombudsperson and what's happening in the Amazon. The communities that we've been focusing on this year, who are affected by these extractivism, basically, they are even more vulnerable because of the pandemic, and they need to have access to justice. They need to have a way to make complaints against Canadian companies, and for Canadians to know about what they're doing overseas. And so I really want to invite you to this rally. I'll put the link in the chat. So it's on Sunday, October 18th at 4 p.m. Eastern, and it's going to be very, very exciting, and I hope that many of you will join us for that exciting virtual rally. So I'll send you the information now. And so we're not giving up. We're not giving up on our battle, on our struggle for the ombudsperson. We need to be able to tell our partners that, yes, there is a mechanism for you to be able to make a complaint and seek justice and seek reparations for the damage that Canadian companies have caused in your communities.
Thank you, Elana. This question is addressed to Padre Dario. you know, you were mentioning this idea that, you know, and I think it was also evoked in some of the messages of solidarity, the fact that Indigenous communities are having to protect their territory, and that these territories are not, you know, not protected under legislation by the Brazilian government. So the question is, you know, how many Indigenous peoples have been displaced? Of course, they have been displaced because of fires, because of mining, because of, you know, the large agro industry and cattle and buffalo farming. So can you give a general context of how much you know, the communities, these Indigenous peoples and communities are being displaced, and why their territory is not necessarily being recognized and respected, and that they can be kind of evacuated from these lands that they have been stewards of and have been, you know, occupying for millennials, right? So curious for you to answer this question.
Thank you. I will try. I don't have numbers and the dimension of it, but I can say that many of the indigenous peoples and regions had to retire themselves. In very many cases, they did not leave their regions, but they had to enter more and more into more isolated parts of their lands in order not to be contaminated and not to be invaded by the COVID-19. And the invasors, as and Catherine already explained, in several occasions are exactly connected with the exploitation projects, especially mining projects, especially from of gold, from illegal exploitation of gold. There are very many denounces. For example, in the Yanomami land, they are denouncing the invasion of 20,000 illegal miners inside their lands. It's very incredible that during the COVID period, in these 6 months, the extraction of gold and the invasion of indigenous illegal invasion of course of their lands is increasing. So we say that they don't that miners and the people who devastate the forest don't make home office, because they are still working and working more and more, because there is less fiscalization, less control from the state, and there is a very big responsibility of the state. So, and another problem is from the isolated indigenous groups, which are those which we call the free indigenous groups, that don't want to be connected with our society and with our world, and they are more and more in danger, because COVID is also getting up to them too, because of these invasions. That's the general situation. A very interesting thing is the ability of self-organization of these communities, both in order to take care of themselves through through ancestral knowledges about health and use of natural remedies, and also the self-organization in order to protect their lands. They already were being struggling against the invasions of those who were cutting their trees and forest. But now they are already protecting themselves also from the people entering their regions and with this contaminating them with COVID-19. So the self-organization of the local and indigenous communities is still a sign of hope and resistance.
Thank you. It's interesting, you know, a lot of our members here are also saying, you know, how can we act differently and what are the different approaches that we can use here in Canada? One person asked, how can we encourage ethical investing by like fund managers and investment firms like Forbes in Manhattan? And we also have a similar question addressed to both Padre, Dario, and Elana. Is there a list of dioceses and religious communities that are divesting from mining activity through their group investments? Are they willing to share their information with Canadians? Is it publicly available somewhere? And how can divestment campaigns be brought to families and to long-term investors? So this is us individually, but also how can we push large companies to consider ethical investment?
You are exploiting me. Very difficult questions. Well, about the divestment campaign, we are starting this campaign, and the first step in our initiative is sensitizing and trying to verify which are the protocols and the ethic rules that the religious groups, religious congregations or dioceses use. Because the first step is to interconnect and to check which kind of protocol and ethical proposals are most effective, and try to help those who are who need to develop their visions with the example of colleagues. I have to say that we are finding a very big interest about this item, and also the Amazon Synod stressed the importance of divesting from extractivism, extractive industries. And also the president of the European Bishop Council reinforced this initiative. So we have some dioceses and also already some congregations who are that are checking their investments. We are working both in the verification of the connection of your investments to eventually damaging industries in Latin America, in our experiences, and also in the other ground, which kind of ethical investments could be the substitution of these first wrong investments. So there is very much work to be done, and the first one is to sensitize. So for example, if some of you is directly connected with dioceses or religious congregation, please make them know this campaign, which we will be launching also a website, which is divestinmining.org, and please make them know that there is a sort of working group about it, and we can technically interact and interchange experiences, and step by step being changing the way we are using our money. Thank you.
Thank you, Padre Dario, and I'll also get Elana to kind of weigh in on this. But another place where I have found really interesting information in terms of what's happening around the world in terms of divestment is the Global Catholic Climate Movement. They seem to publish a lot of the articles where, for example, the Irish Church, has started to divest, where different religious communities have started to divest, and it's extremely encouraging. And so personally, I have asked my financial advisor, that I am you know, ethically unable to have a fund that is invested in mining. And so we're really looking at alternatives, somewhere where I'm comfortable to invest without kind of being counter to my values. And I know it is at times difficult, but if this movement continues, I think it'll be a lot easier for us to invest ethically. So Elana, I think you probably had something to add.
Yes, I really want to thank Padre Dario for telling us about that incredible Iglesia y Minería campaign on divestment from mining. And also I want to take this opportunity to thank Padre Dario because he must leave us for another meeting. And so I really want to thank you for joining us. It's so precious to hear your voice, your testimonials of what's currently happening in the Amazon. And it's always a pleasure to have you. And I hope that we'll see you again in the future, Padre Dario.
Thank you, Elana. Thank you to all of you, and very many felicitations for your campaign and for your commitment to Amazon and to our peoples. See you.
Thank you so much. Goodbye. So I hope that that you'll still be able to stay with us. We do have a little bit more time to answer the other questions. And just to talk about divestment, thank you so much, Janelle, for mentioning the Global Catholic Climate Movement, who has been incredibly successful in supporting religious communities, dioceses, as well as organizations like Development and Peace and other organizations that might have investments and deciding together to choose to divest. I know that the United Church has been working on this with their investment funds, and it's a very powerful way to take action to protect communities from mining. And so, and we, and of course, as you know, at Development and Peace, we haven't done a campaign on divestment from mining or from fossil fuels, but these are great ideas for future campaigning.
Thank you so much, Elana. And another website that I actually contributed to is, so a friend of mine who's in the United Church, she's a minister in the United Church out of Vancouver. She's also a counselor actually in Vancouver. And she had started a page called fossilfreefaith.ca. So I'll put it in the chat. This is a multi-faith platform where different faith groups, different organizations are sharing resources about how to divest, how to have conversations about divestment, but also kind of big statements from our faith leaders, whether they be Pope Francis or you know, leaders within the Jewish faith, the Muslim faith, etc. So I encourage you to check it out because it does help when we have so many you know, these resources already at our disposal, and that will allow us to have those at times very difficult conversations with people that don't realize that our investment is having an impact on people in another country at the other end of the world. So it appears that I think we were managed. I think there was about 17 questions. We managed to answer them all. You know, are there any other questions, or if not, we can maybe wrap up our afternoon together. Someone was actually asking, will this, you know, how will this recording be shared so that grassroots folks can be informed? We are recording this live. It will be available on our YouTube page. So once that link is available, please share widely. Please share with your family members. Please share with your diocesan councils. Please share with DNP members. We encourage you to share it far and wide. So are there any last questions? I think we're good. And, you know, one of the things that certainly this year that it was incredibly, in some ways disappointing, well, no, just incredibly disappointing is the fact that Bill C-262 in Canada did not pass at the Senate. So this bill would have allowed Canada to actually officially sign, because we have yet to adopt it, is the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. I feel strongly about Canada needing to adopt and sign it, and for it to actually transpire through all of the laws in Canada. Free, prior, and informed consent is extremely important. We see it not only, we're seeing examples of the importance of it in Brazil, but also we had some comments saying that we should also look in our own backyard, and that it is necessary for us to keep pushing here in Canada, because this same thing is happening to Indigenous communities in Canada. So let's not let go of that. Let's keep pushing. Let's keep hoping that Canada will finally adopt it in terms of changing laws, in terms of addressing the injustice that is suffered by Indigenous communities, whether they be in Canada or in Brazil. I think we have come to a close. We have come to the end of our webinar. Luke, I think we can move forward. And once again, all those beautiful pictures, young folks from across the country who got involved in our campaign. So I'd invite us to kind of collect ourselves, to take a deep breath, and please join me in our closing prayer. Creator God, allow my ears to listen to the cry of the earth, the voices of my sisters and brothers, those who face the harsh reality of climate change. Allow my eyes to see the beauty of creation in flowers, creatures, forests, and cities alike. Allow my voice to speak out for justice and ensure people living in poverty are heard. Allow my hands to care for the earth, to toil, to reap, to celebrate. Allow my feet to take the path less trod, to walk the extra mile, and to walk lightly on this earth so as to not harm creation. As we go forth with joy and solidarity in our hearts, may you accompany us to care for our common home. Amen. So thank you, everyone. I wish you a good feast of St. Francis. Nice Sunday evening to you all, and I'm sure we will see you virtually at one point in time this year. Thanks again.